everybody, and welcome back to another Doctor Who action figure product review. In today's review I'm going to be taking a look at one of the latest releases as a part of the B&M exclusive Doctor Who action figure line, the beginning of another brand new wave of action figures. In today's review I'm going to be taking a look at the Unit 1975 collector set as featuring a 4th Doctor from the Terror of the Zygons, the opening story to Doctor Who Season 13, packaged alongside a second variation of Sergeant Benton and a rather familiar looking unit soldier. This set has a recommended retail of £19.99 and it's currently available from stores throughout the UK at B&M exclusively. Taking a look at the packaging, this is exactly the same style guide that we've seen over the past many years, and no doubt by this point you're probably sick of the sight of this packaging after trying to track down these collector sets for months on end in many different branches of B&M. At the very front you do of course get a large preview window giving a very good look at the figures on the inside of the box, as well as the limited edition emblem there at the very bottom and the title of the set as well. We also have a graphic of the TARDIS as well as the Doctor Who logo, and the same details are repeated on all of the other sides. Briefly flipping around to the back, because there really isn't that much to talk about, we just get further images of the figures on the inside of the box, and once again, as I always say throughout these reviews, it would be nice to maybe have a little write-up about the characters, or maybe even a brief synopsis about Terror of the Zygons as a story, but I suppose the design overall is simplistic and fairly stylish. So here we have the Unit 1975 collector set out of the box. Now of course previously as a part of the B&M line we got to see the release of the Unit 1971 collector set, featuring for the first time the brand new head sculpts for Sergeant Benton and Captain Mike Yates. It's pretty inevitable that we were going to see second and possibly even third variations of these characters in the future in order to get the money's worth for the sculpts that they've created as a part of this series, and this set is a very welcome one. Of course we get to see a second variation of Sergeant Benton, this time round in a uniform that looks more familiar to that of Terror of the Zygons, as well as a new variation of the 4th Doctor, in fact a variation of the 4th Doctor that a lot of classic series action figure collectors have wanted for many years. A Unit 1975 collector set is definitely one to look out for, because this is the first time for quite a number of years that we get to see a brand new head sculpt for the 4th Doctor, something of which that we're not particularly used to with the B&M line of action figures. Normally we're used to new sculpts being dedicated to brand new characters that have never been released before as a part of the classic series line, and it's nice and it's different, and it certainly makes a change from the same sculpts that we've seen being used over and over again, and this is definitely a figure that will stand out on the shelf. So let's start off this review by taking a look at Sergeant Benton and the unit soldier. Now very much like the Unit 1971 collector set, of course the base sculpt for both of these figures are exactly the same. It is in fact a classic series brigadier that has been used on multiple variants in the past, so that is the legs being identical as well as the body underneath the main torso piece. Of course you have the inclusion of the PVC that has been wrapped around the main body to give the illusion of a brand new costume. This is a very effective way of creating new action figures, and we've also seen it used with the Romana 1 as a part of this series, of course from the Power of Cruel. I think it's definitely a step forward for future classic series characters being released as a part of this line in the future. Much as I do love the release of classic series action figures as a part of the B&M series, in recent years we've had one figure being released and then a few months down the line we'll get the same identical figure, however with a few paint application changes, and normally that second version is quite nice, however not particularly essential. This time round though, however, we have a sculpt that has been used and a paint application on top that I actually think is more effective compared to the original set, as this time round we have a camouflage colour palette that has been applied to the entirety of the costume using multiple shades of green as well as the odd splash of burgundy in there as well. And that is not to say that I don't like the initial Unit 1971 collector set, I really do, I think it looks lovely. This paint application is a lot more interesting to look at. Of course it is exactly the same sculpt, so we get the same brilliant details, including the collar there at the very top as well as the neckerchief, which has been painted using an ever so slightly darker shade of green, and then running down the middle we have the inclusion of various buttons that have been sculpted onto the jacket, as well as 2 pockets on either side of the chest. In the very centre of the jacket we do also get the inclusion of these padded pouches, no doubt so Sergeant Benton can hold bullets, jelly babies and anything else that he needs to get himself through the day whilst he's filming on the Scottish Highlands. This has been nicely detailed. Of course, we have a series of buckles there around the front to really create that impression of a pouch with things inside. Also have floating around the chest here the belt, which is an ever so slightly lighter shade of green, and a silver highlight has been applied over the top of this to represent the buckle. Flipping around to the back of the uniform, of course we get the continuation of the pouches with all of these straps running around the top half of the torso. Again, this has been painted an ever so slightly darker green so it stands out from the camouflage underneath on the main jacket. Some additional detailing on the arms. Now of course both Sergeant Benton and definitely not Captain Mike Yates both use exactly the same torso piece, meaning that generally the detailing remains the same. However, there is a few paint application changes between the two figures in order to differentiate ranks. So to start off with, of course on Sergeant Benton we have the inclusion of a number of lines to represent his sergeant rank, then as well as at the very top of the arm we have the inclusion of the unit emblem, which has been rather sharply painted featuring the unit lettering. This is something that is present on both Sergeant Benton and the unit soldier. You also have some ever so slight paint application changes on the pouches. As previously covered here on Sergeant Benton, we have an ever so slightly darker green that has been used. However, on the unit soldier, this is a much lighter design, almost exactly the same shade to the belt running around the middle. Again, this is something that didn't necessarily have to be done. However, I like the fact it has been done. It's something that's different and kind of separates both of the action figures, and it gives a little bit of variety, which is always quite nice. Once again mirroring the design of the Unit 1971 collector's set, we also have the inclusion of two gloved hands on both of the action figures, which again retain some similar detailing of the leather design, as well as the lines running around the palms of the glove itself. Sculpted in an ever so slightly more burgundy plastic, I do believe compared to the previous release, they do seem to look ever so slightly lighter. However, of course, I currently don't have the Unit 1971 collector's set to hand, so I can't check for sure, but I do think they're ever so slightly different, but pretty much borderline unnoticeable. Moving further down the costume now to take a look at the legs. These have in fact once again ever so slightly changed in shade compared to the Unit 1971 collector set. I do believe that these are now an ever so slightly more pea shade of green compared to the darker seen on the original set. It isn't just a block colour, we actually have a little bit of a wash that has been applied over the top of this using a light paint application. Again, this is something that wasn't necessary, however I like the fact it has been done. It definitely creates some character with these action figures, definitely makes something that would have been boring a bit more interesting. Then finally, to finish off for the costume, because here on the Host Productions we talk about the things that really matter and are very interesting indeed, we have shoes. These are again an ever so slightly different shade, borderline basically unnoticeable compared to that of the Unit 1971 collector set. They're now an ever so slightly lighter brown, however we do have a paint application at the bottom to represent the base or the sole of the shoe. But other than that, it's just a shoe, not really too much to talk about. For the next part of this review, think back to when you normally go to B&M stores to purchase Doctor Who B&M exclusive action figures. You've trekked quite a while, maybe you've commuted like an hour or two, and you're very disappointed to find that there is absolutely nothing on the shelf, and you can't seem to hide that disappointment. Does the facial expression look ever so slightly familiar? It is Sergeant Benton, and once again, he's sulking. And the likeness is exactly the same to the previous release. He has that rather unusual sulk, however overall the paint application is actually really good and it looks just like John Levine. Around the eyes, including the eye whites and the blue of the iris, rather intricately painted, and then we also have the sharp natural detailing of the lips and eyebrows in there as well. The skin tone is rather natural, but you have an ever so slight highlight around the cheekbones, which I really do like, again making him look rather healthy, as well as bringing out the sculpt even further. And then flipping around to the side, once again we have the paint application of the ears and of course the hair in there as well, which has been this time painted, I do believe, an ever so slightly lighter brown, however don't quote me on that. And then of course to finish off we have the inclusion of the unit beret, which again I think might be ever so slightly different in colour compared to the previous release, but it is pretty much unnoticeable. Now we move over to the other unit soldier of the set. It is of course Captain Mike Yates, or Captain Mike Yates in disguise, or Captain Mike Yates' brother with a moustache, incognito Captain Mike Yates, or just another man entirely that looks ever so slightly like Captain Mike Yates. One thing is certain, when I woke up this morning, I never quite expected that I would say Captain Mike Yates in the same sentence as many times that I just have. But hey ho, life's full of surprises. It can't lie, I'm not particularly that fussed by this figure. I think it's just alright, and it is simply there to bulk out the set, and I don't really mind that they've used Captain Mike Yates' sculpt overall as a base, because if anything, I find it pretty bloody funny. The paint application on this has been upgraded ever so slightly compared to the previous version, most notably of course that giant moustache in the very middle which has just been slapped on using a grey paint application, and other than that the paint apps are pretty decent and sharp. Lips, eyebrows and eyes look all very natural. This time round we have a light brown paint application for the iris, which, don't quote me on it, I believe that is ever so slightly different to the original Unit 1971 collector set paint applications, and again, much like Sergeant Benton, we have a very natural, healthy looking skin tone that has been used, not too overdone, but just right. And the same compliments to the previous release, I absolutely love the fact that the beret is an ever so slightly different sculpt compared to Sergeant Benton's and the Brigadier's. It's just a lovely touch, and they might as well have done it, to be honest, because it's a different sculpt anyway underneath the beret, so just a nice little alteration. So yeah, something that I really appreciate with this collector set is that Character Options this time round have actually packaged proper unit guns from the 1970s that are very much like the guns that the actual soldiers had throughout Terror of the Zygons, as opposed to that rather unusual futuristic looking gun that I do believe was from the Primeval series that was seen within the previous Unit 1971 collector set. And of course, due to the inclusion of the two handles, it means that overall these gun accessories are actually a little bit easier to hold compared to the previous versions. They generally look a lot more natural in the hands of both of these unit soldiers, meaning that they can go on to fight alongside the Doctor and no doubt defeat Bro Tom and his Zygon friends, really completing the look. I'm happy to see that they've been included within this set. So now moving on to the main highlight of the set, and arguably one of the highlights of this entire B&M exclusive series for October, it is of course the 4th Doctor in his Tam O'Shanter hat and tartan scarf from Terror of the Zygons, a costume that I personally wanted to see released for quite a number of years, and it's great to finally be able to add this costume to the shelf, simply because it stands out from everything else. It's a lovely little obscure variant, which admittedly has made quite a lot of impact within Doctor Who costume history, as of course the base of this figure is surprisingly a base that we've seen a number of times already as a part of the B&M line. Of course it was also used for Harry Sullivan a number of years ago, and we've actually seen this sculpt used for multiple versions of the 4th Doctor, released as a part of the Forbidden Planet exclusive Sontaran Experiment collector set, as well as the Genesis of the Daleks collector set. And to be honest, I think that this repurpose is actually pretty good. We do have a number of paint application changes to make it look ever so slightly more like the costume as seen throughout the story, and admittedly I really like it. I think it is a really cool looking figure, and the brand new head sculpt and scarf definitely set it off. There's something about the 4th Doctor costumes within the Character Options action figure format that I really do love, because there's such a brilliant sculpt here that shows off all the different layers of the costume. We start off there at the very bottom with the inclusion of the white shirt, which has been given a rather vibrant paint application, and even the ever so slight sculpting detailing there of a collar underneath. Inclusion of the tie, which this time round has been painted a darker green, which I do believe on the previous Forbidden Planet exclusive releases is usually painted a burnt orangey colour. So we have the inclusion of the 4th Doctor's waistcoat, which overall has been given a rather nice yellowy base colour, and then over the top of this we have a purpley blue paint application representing the checkered design on the waistcoat itself. On top of this we also have the ever so slight suggestion of the standard season 12 jacket there peeking out at the side using a burgundy paint application. On top of all of this we get the inclusion of the 4th Doctor's regular duffel coat. That we've done a brilliant job of representing the material. We have lots of creases and wrinkles within the coat to generally make the costume overall sit naturally on the body. Now again, this is a rather similar colour to some of the previous 4th Doctors that we've seen released. However, the colour has been ever so slightly changed. I do believe this is now an ever so slightly more waxy, glossier, lighter brown compared to that of some of the previous releases. Then we turn around to the back. Again, we have more creases and wrinkles, including of course this panelling around the shoulders, which I'm rather impressed with. And then we also have the seam there running down the middle also. So yes, a really lovely sculpt, and generally finishes off the costume well. So now we move down to the lower half of the costume, and I'm going to need to peel back the coat here ever so slightly to give a good look at this detailing that has been applied on the trousers, something of which that has never been present on the previous 4th Doctor figures from this time period. Absolutely love the finish that has been applied over the top. Of course we have a lighter brown base colour that has been used, but over the top of this you get this lovely textured detailing, almost looking a bit like Pebble Dash. We have some black in there, some darker browns, and possibly even the ever so slight suggestion of red. Make them material overall look a bit bitty and tatty, and I really do like it. Again, it creates texture and it makes the costume overall look a lot more interesting. It also draws more attention to the shoes below, as we have a lovely light brown paint application that has been used, and then over the top of this we have a darker wash that has been applied to give the shoes the appearance of being worn over time. This once again brings out the details of the various panels on the shoe, as well as the patterning and lacing running down the middle. And of course, no 4th Doctor action figure will be complete without a scarf. This time round, a rather unique variation of scarf that we've never seen before as a part of the character options series. This is in fact a brand new sculpt, which I'm really happy to see, as kind of painting the original version wouldn't have really been as effective, so it's great to see that they're expanding out and actually developing and making new sculpts where they can, fitted in a red plastic, and then over the top some intricate detailing has been applied, including lines of yellow, purple, white and green, really emphasising that tartan patterning. And then of course towards the very bottom we also have the inclusion of the tassels there as well, have been given a yellow wash. Of course, one of the issues with making accessories for small action figures, in particular the likes of scarves and cloaks, is that more than often they look very, very bulky and don't really sit naturally on the action figure's body. But in the case of this action figure, I think it has been sculpted in a way that is very effective, because it also drips over the back of the shoulder, very much like how it did throughout the story itself. And it will be great to actually see a version of the regular 4th Doctor scarf also sculpted like this. And as we conclude the tartan scarf, it only really makes sense to lead up to the head to take a look at the tam o' shanter hat. Again, some really lovely precise details have been applied on this, including a white band running around the middle, with the additional detailing of a few red crosses running around the sides. I absolutely love this silver highlight that has been applied here to represent the badge, then this leading out to the tassels that actually peak above the hat itself, with various little lumps really looking like material that is actually floating naturally. It itself is finished off with this bobble at the top, which again has a red paint application. The rest of the hat has been given a glossy black finish. And now we move on to the thing that has generated various arguments on Twitter, but then again, that's not really saying much, because pretty much the entirety of Twitter these days is basically one big massive argument. We have the likeness to Tom Baker. The actual sculpt is incredible. It most definitely looks like Tom Baker. We have some lovely sharp detailing on this. I think that overall the face structure is undeniably Tom. I absolutely love the way that we have the hair being sculpted as well. Of course, the vast majority of this is in fact under the tam o' shanter hat. However, we do have a lot of plumage almost coming around the sides. We have a number of curls that have been flattened due to it being tucked underneath the hat, and this has been given a really lovely darker brown base colour, and then of course a lighter wash of brown has been applied over the top of this in order to emphasise those curls. And equally, as we float around to the back here, we even have the inclusion of the little tassels of the hat dripping down from the hair and even onto the shoulders, a really lovely touch with lots of precise details. The sculpt is perfect, but the paint application isn't. I actually think that mine's pretty decent paint application wise. I think overall it's very sharp, and it's definitely a vast improvement on some of the other B&M exclusive figures that we've seen in earlier years within the line, often having rather basic paint. This time round it is very sharp. I love the inclusion of the eye whites. I love the little reflective dot in there as well as the light blue iris. Equally, we've got some very natural paint application details on the eyebrows as well as the mouth, but it's the placement. The placement overall on this figure is okay, but when I was in store flicking through the various 1975 collector sets that were available, there was quite a number of them, and a lot of them looked in pain, quite frankly. A lot of them looked like they were struggling, the others looked very sad indeed. I did see one where his head was kind of at an angle and nearly falling off, so I think it is all down to the placement. It's where the eyes and the eyebrows are in correspondence to where they're actually meant to be on the sculpt, and as a result it creates an overall finish that looks ever so slightly off. But in the case of my version, I think it's probably one of the better ones. It looks sharp and it looks like Tom, but again, it's just down to personal preference. The one piece of advice that I'd probably take from this review is, if I was you, if you can, go into store and personally pick your 4th Doctor set, because there was some very ill-looking Toms that I've seen that day that quite frankly are going to remain burnt into my memory for quite a long time. I know it's nearly Halloween, but God, they were quite haunting. Briefly talking about articulation to finish off the review, basically the Fourth Doctor is your standard articulation that you would come to expect from any classic series action figure from the early 2010s, and then we have Sergeant Benton and definitely not Captain Mike Yates. Again, very basic articulation, however we do have the inclusion of the ball joint at the shoulders, adding extra posability due to that figure, of course the base sculpt being the Brigadier, and he was one of the later releases as a part of the classic series action figure line. So there we have it, that is my review of the Doctor Who B&M exclusive Unit 1975 Terror of the Zygons collector set, featuring Sergeant Benton, the Fourth Doctor, in tartan scarf and tam o' shanter hat, and of course a regular unit soldier. Overall, a really lovely set. I really do like it. I think in particular, of course, the Fourth Doctor is an incredible variant and one that many Doctor Who action figure collectors have wanted for many years indeed. The head sculpt is brilliant, although I do advise going into store to pick your own personally. The inclusion of the tartan scarf is a nice touch, also being a brand new sculpt. I love the difference in paint application that has been applied to the costume overall, in particular the texturing on the trousers. As for Sergeant Benton, to be honest, I was expecting a second variant at some point. It only makes sense if Character Options make a brand new sculpt, they're going to get their money's worth from said sculpt. I would dare say that this version of his character is actually more interesting compared to the original version. The costume overall has more details and it looks visually a bit more exciting. And as for definitely not Captain Mike Yates, Moustache Yates, whatever you want to call him, he's alright. He's a figure that is there just to pad out the set. I'm aware that a number of people have been saying online, why didn't they do Harry Sullivan in his blue suit using, say, the Dalek-Sec hybrid body? Why didn't they do a Terror of the Zygons version of Sarah using the same base body that they used for Romana 1 in the previous wave? And Yaz, yes, both of those figures are interesting concepts and quite possibly we may see them eventually. There is a reason why they've put Captain Mike Yates within this set disguised as another figure, and that is perhaps because both of those variants of Harry and Sarah are going to be coming at some point in the future. To be honest, I would like a set that is both of those figures, along with a re-release of the Season 12 Fourth Doctor, with some more TV accurate paint applications, very much like how we got to see with the Fifth Doctor's costume. But in conclusion for this set, for £20 it's alright. I think it is definitely worth it for the Fourth Doctor alone, with some really lovely details and a great addition to the shelf, finally. So thank you very much for watching this review. I hope you have enjoyed it. Do of course stay tuned on the Host Productions for brand new Doctor Who content each and every week, as well as of course the continuation of this B&M collector set review series. So thanks for watching, have a nice day, and I shall see you all next time. Bye for now.